Today on What's Hot, What's Not, we are making the most. I'm Lanissa, and this is my homegirl, Kate, and we are talking about making the most of a difficult situation. And when we talk about difficult situations, we're talking about difficult situations in life, difficult situations in the field. And these can be little things that trip us up throughout the day, like getting stuck in traffic or getting caught in a torrential rainstorm, which happened to me when I was in the field early on in my career until I learned to invest in a really good raincoat. Or they can be major life events. You have a health crisis, you have a family crisis, something else goes on in your life. Kate and I, when we were talking offline, one of the things we talked about is like, even during the pandemic, like we had to all learn collectively as like an entire world to make the most of a difficult situation. And so that is what we're talking about today. And what's hot and what's not is making the most of a difficult situation. So what's hot is when you're in that difficult relation, or when you're in that difficult situation, staying in relationship. And so, yeah. Kate, I would love for you to talk more about this because you have some great stories and you have some great examples that I would love for you to share with us.
Yeah, I think that is the key, is like the way that you can make the most is to stay in relationship with your territory, right? I mean, that's our job, is to, and if we've been doing it up until this difficult time, we've got rapport, we've got history, we have a working friendship, right? And so when something difficult happens, I think as long as we maintain that relationship, then we can move on after the difficult season is over, right? What the hard thing to come back from is when you kind of ghost, because it got hard and you shut down and the relationship was left stagnant. And I'm talking about this like in theory, but we can give an example of that. We were talking about, like you said, about the pandemic, and that affected everyone, right? It affected every office, every business, every person that lived in the world, right?
Right.
And so one of the ways I remember that we stayed in relationship is we just talked about it. It was what was going on in our office, was there were things going on in their office or their family, or how did it affect their loved ones? And different people reacted to it differently, right? Or, some were super scared, others were not. And the point is we just went through it together. Now, sometimes that meant an office didn't want to be called on anymore. They just wanted to have a Zoom meeting. Great. But we stayed in relationship, right? We didn't just shut down. Or you can think about it in terms of like, have you ever had a friendship where you're friends, you're talking all the time, maybe you're meeting, hanging out, and then all of a sudden they kind of just stop returning your calls, stop showing up, stop asking you to hang out with them. And you're like, what's going on? And you might reach out to them, and then, time passes, and then they come back and they go, so I'm really sorry I didn't reach out to you. I was just going through a difficult time. And you're like, well, why? You could have told me that. We're friends, right?
We could have worked through it together.
I would have been here for you, right? I could have been your shoulder to cry on. And so I think if you just keep that in the back of your mind, whether the difficult season is a day, like you said, something happens, you get caught in the rain, or you rear end somebody, or you're running late, whatever it is. And we're not saying you go to your accountant and just air all your problems. Like, that's not what we're saying, but we're just saying that you stay in relationship with them as you go through that difficult time. One example I can give too, I remember when I had my second son, I was going to go out on maternity leave. And at this time we worked in pairs. We had partners, but my partner spot was vacant. I didn't have a partner at that time, and they hadn't hired one yet. And they were not in any hurry to hire one just because of budget reasons, right? And I was looking at 3 months that there was going to be nobody calling on our territory, right?
That's a long time. Yeah.
It was a long time. And that's a lot of time for the competition to come in and make friends, right? And I'm like, how am I going to stay in relationship while I'm not in territory? I also didn't want to work while I was on maternity leave, right?
Right.
So I looked ahead, I prepped them, we talked about it, we gave dates, I made them a list of contact numbers for, our home office, if they needed this or if they need this. I stocked them up on supplies, on samples, extra samples. I dropped off care kits. So I made bags of like, extra samples, extra things, extra resources, whatever it might be. And then, a few days before the baby was coming out, just remember everybody, I'm going to be on maternity leave. And what was so cool is when I came back, everyone was like so excited to hear about, oh, how was your leave? Oh, I can't believe you're back. Can we see pictures of the baby? Because it's almost like they went through maternity leave with me, right? They were so excited because they were going through it with me. We were in relationship. I didn't just say, hey, I'll be out for 3 months, so see y'all when I get back. Like, we went through it together, even though we did have a 3-month break. So when we say making the most, we just mean that it's not always going to look 100% all the time. It's just not, right? You're not always going to hit all your KPIs. You're not always going to feel like giving 110%, right?
Especially
So
when
it's
it's
just
110 degrees out like it is today in Texas and Oklahoma.
amen, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a good day for a virtual call. Like, this is a great day to say, hey, how do you feel about a Zoom lunch meeting with your team or whatever? And just making the most of all of the external things that are happening to you, to them, to the world. But you keep pressing forward and you go through it with them and in relationship with them. And then when the difficult season's over, you'll see the payoff from that. You'll see a deepened relationship with them, a strengthened relationship with them. And that's how you can transform your business and transform your territory and be very incredibly satisfied with what you're doing out there. What do you think, Lanissa?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say just some practical ways of how to do that. And I love what you brought out about your maternity leave. You made a plan. You made a plan for your leave. You shared that plan with your customers, and then you followed through on that plan. And so I know we've talked about it before, like I am the #1 fan of a call plan. And so when you have a plan in place for your business, whether that's a call plan, whether that's, some other plan of goals and things that you're working towards, then it's a lot easier to manage these difficult times, these difficult seasons. And if you have to adapt, you have a plan, but you can adapt a plan. If you have zero plan, it's a lot harder to adapt when there's zero plan.
Right.
It's a lot easier to shut down and out. And that's actually what's not hot. What's not hot is checking out, because it's hard, because it's difficult, because you're in a difficult space. A lot of times it feels easier in the moment to just check out. I'm just not going to call on that office because it's difficult. I'm not going to make these calls today because I had a rough day. We're not going to make these calls this season because it's a rough season, and we're just not going to do that. And kind of going back to the pandemic conversation, we're years out from that now, and the practices that stayed in relationship and they learned to shift and adjust and utilize phone calls and Zoom and e-blast and just utilize the resources available to them, but still maintain those relationships, they bounced back immediately because those relationships were still intact. And so when offices reopened and patients were ready for care, all of that, was still there. That never went away. But the practices that shut down, some of my biggest clients are people that are coming to me now years later and saying, we really just kind of shut down during the pandemic. We lost those relationships. Now we got to get them back. And so there are people that did not adapt. And so that's why we're saying, what is hot is staying in relationship. So whatever you do, find ways to stay in relationship. Have a plan. And if you have a consistent plan in the good times, it's really easy to adapt that plan in the bad times. And then what's not hot is checking out. So make sure you hang in there. That's right. Don't check out. Stay in relationship. If you want to learn more, you can find us at lanissabrantley.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.